Simply because I touched the prey before the Wolf King began his feast, I was instantly struck down by the elders of the pack, one after another, pinned to the ground like a blasphemer. In the world of wolves, order is an unbreakable law, and the alpha alone holds the right to pass judgment. My action was seen as a blatant act of defiance. I left the pack. Directionless. Alone. I quickened my pace, racing through dense forests, plowing across cold, marshy lowlands. In just 5 days, I had covered more than 200 kilometers. A wolf without a pack answers to no law. But in losing rules, I had also lost the strength that once came from unity. Hunger soon dragged me back to the harshness of reality. I had never learned how to survive alone. All I had left was instinct. I followed the scent of food, quietly, cautiously, each step gentle as a falling leaf. But as I drew closer, I discovered it was only a raccoon dog. The stench from its body was enough to make me recoil. My stomach was empty, yet I could not bring myself to touch it. I no longer hungered for food. Silently, I kept moving forward. Until, in the stillness of the wild, a mature stag appeared before me, massive, muscle-bound, a creature forged of strength and pulsing with life. By nature's rule, it takes an entire pack to bring down a full-grown stag. But I was alone, and I had no other choice. I charged, pouring every last drop of strength into a desperate sprint. The stag panicked, bolted into the open, and, in its frenzy, ran straight onto the stretch of asphalt laid by humans. A dull, heavy thud echoed across the valley. And then, silence. The stag lay motionless, its body fixed to the cold earth like a shadow pinned in place. I stepped closer. What startled me most wasn't the speed of death. But just as I lowered my head, ready to take the first bite, that sound came again. I fled. It was the understanding, that if I didn't leave, the next body to hit the ground could be mine. Days had passed since my last real meal. Hunger gnawed at my joints, turning each step into a heavy, sluggish drag. I dragged myself into the tall grass, and collapsed, as the last light of dusk faded from the sky. All I hoped for, was that in my dreams, there might be just a little food to quiet the ache inside my hollow belly. When the first light began to flicker on the horizon, I chose to rise. And walk again. And through haze, I saw a brown bear, leisurely enjoying its meal. In a few short strides, I lunged, trying to snatch a scrap of meat from the still warm pile of food. But I had misjudged, the bear's strength was far beyond anything I had imagined. After just a few clashes, I understood, I didn't stand a chance. I was forced to retreat. Failure didn't frighten me. But every reckless attempt came at a cost, the last reserves of strength in a body already near collapse. The narrow forest path stretched on, endlessly, and I still kept walking. Not far ahead, a herd of wild horses thundered across the plain like wind. I began tracking them. Watching the way they moved, fluid and synchronized, as if they were one living organism. And suddenly, something within me shifted. Whether wolf or horse, the lone creature will always exhaust itself in the end. Because life was never meant to be a solo performance. From that moment on, a new goal burned quietly in my heart. I would seek out a pack that could accept me. Time slipped past me. I survived by stealing chickens from distant farms, by digging through rusted bins for scraps left behind by humans. After a journey of more than 500 kilometers, I stumbled into a nature reserve in the heart of Serbia. Then, one early morning, I caught a scent I hadn't smelled in a long, the scent of my own kind. I followed it, step by step, each breath filled with cautious hope, until at last, a wolf pack emerged before me. Lowering my head in submission, I approached slowly. A fragile hope flickering quietly inside my chest. But the alpha noticed me quickly, and just as quickly, rejected me. This land, he made clear, didn't hold enough for all. One more wolf meant one more mouth to feed, one more rival. I understood. But it still stung. Once again, I became a wanderer. But this time, I wandered with eyes open. Now, I know how to hunt mice. With my belly barely full from a meager meal, I turned west once more, and moved on. Autumn faded. Winter arrived. On a snow-blanketed, bitterly cold day, I stood upon a hillside, lifted my head, and howled into the sky, hoping that somewhere, in this endless sea of white, an echo might find its way back to me. A shadow swept across the sky and landed in front of me. A black raven, circling above me, calling out with shrill, urgent cries. But then, it flew to the top of the hill, then back again. Repeating the motion, gesturing with insistence. Something clicked. I rose to my feet, and quietly followed. And thanks to that raven, I found it, a full-grown stag, strong, towering, alive with power. I, still new to the hunt, was nowhere near ready to take on a final boss like that. The raven seemed to understand. Rabbits, they were my true specialty. We worked together a few times, and then, something miraculous happened. I brought down my first prey after days of starvation. We moved as if we'd hunted together for years. One wolf. One raven. In the vastness of the forest, we formed a rare alliance. It watched from the skies. I stalked from the ground. It found prey for me. And I, in turn, left behind what scraps I could. Still, not every hunt ended in success. When I failed, it would glide down beside me, perch near my side, and let out a soft, whispering call. Thanks to its silent companionship, I made it through my first winter after being cast out of the pack. The snow melted. Spring returned to the wilderness. And I, too, was ready for the next leg of my journey. We moved westward, crossed the border into Serbia, then climbed the grey, stony ridges of Bosnia. Over 1,000 kilometers, and not once did I look back. The pads of my feet had grown calloused, and my body had grown far leaner than the day I left the pack. When I set foot in Croatia, I finally understood, no journey lasts forever. The raven, my companion through so many miles, had found a mate of its own. One evening, beneath a fading sunset, it perched on a bare branch. We looked at each other. It said nothing. Then spread its wings and flew away. I didn't try to stop it. It didn't look back. And I knew, it would never return. Once again, I became a lone traveler. But this time, I wasn't lost. I continued heading northwest, crossing into Slovenia. There, I still hadn't found a pack to call my own. And so, I moved on. While crossing the Tagliamento River in northern Italy, I met a she-wolf. She, too, was a wanderer, walking alone through unfamiliar forests. We looked at each other, but neither of us dared to hold the gaze for long, because among wolves, eye contact is a challenge. I lowered my head, then leapt into the river and caught a large fish, bringing it back to shore like an offering. It was a simple gesture, but the best I could think of, to trade food for trust. She accepted. We hunted together, slept beside one another. Her breath made me feel at peace, my presence shielded her from the storm. A few weeks later, in a quiet patch of forest, we unexpectedly crossed paths with the raven once more. It landed on a high branch, bringing its new mate along. As if it had come to say farewell. Or perhaps, to offer its blessing. Then, without a sound, it flew away again. I continued the journey beside her, my new mate. We crossed the mighty Alps, passed into France, and reached the dense forest straddling the borders of Switzerland and Spain. The land there was rich, thick woods, a mild climate, and an abundance of life. But that land already belonged to another pack. They had pups, territory, a life they were willing to die to protect. At first, we planned to stay just one night. But the moment I entered their line of sight, the alpha didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, letting out a low, rumbling growl. I slowly rose to my full height and moved toward him, not to fight, just to make our presence understood. But just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden commotion erupted in the forest. Humans. They came with guns, and a pack of hounds. The hunt had begun. I fled in desperation, my mate running at my side. Along the way, a young wolf began following us, quietly, from a distance. It crept forward, then lay flat before me, belly exposed, head lowered, an unmistakable gesture of submission among wolves. I hesitated. But in the end, I did not turn it away. Because I knew what it felt like to be left behind. And I knew, somewhere, the cycle of loneliness had to end. 3 wolves, now a pack. In this new forest, for the first time, we raised our heads and howled together. From that moment on, I was no longer a fugitive. I was a guide. We crossed the Pyrenees and finally reached Spain. A remote land, where the mountains rose high and the forests ran deep, a final refuge for the wild wolf. The following spring, my mate gave birth to our first litter. Amid the quiet trees, a tiny eye fluttered open, an innocent gaze, the spark of new life. From Romania to Spain, across 8 countries, more than 3,000 kilometers. I had once been a banished male wolf. Now, I stood atop the mountain as a leader. Below me stretched the vast forests and rugged slopes, my territory. But I knew, being alpha was not a glory, it was a burden. I would have to lead them through drought and frost, through hunger and the barrels of human rifles. I had to teach them how to sense danger, and help them understand, one wolf may survive, but only the pack endures. Nature does not speak of mercy. It speaks of law. A pack does not accept you because you are exceptional, nor does it mourn for your loneliness. Only those who endure solitude and suffering, who brush against the edge of death, can earn even the smallest place on nature's stage. That is survival. That is life. Even when exiled, rejected, or nearly devoured, life will always find a way forward. Like a fragile sprout rising from frozen snow, it will, someday, bloom in spring.